everybody. We're just getting started here. Just going to wait and have some people join in for a few minutes while we're just kind of chatting. Brian, can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you, Brian. I think I hit a wrong button there, so I apologize. But
no problem. This is, we got a few more minutes left, and gives a chance to just chat for a minute.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm going against the grain a little bit, Brian. I guess I'll ask for permission first, but I did build a PowerPoint.
Not a problem.
And if you're cool with that, I would love to show it. It just keeps me on track, quite honestly.
Go for
it's my security blanket. So
yeah, feel free. If you've got a little overview page you want to share right now while we're just chatting, you can go ahead and load that on the screen for us.
Let me kind of get my bearings with Zoho a little bit here, and then we'll get fired up.
Maybe while you're doing that, it's maybe a good chance for me to talk about Zoho for a second. For those of you who maybe joined, you saw the email, you saw the join button, but it didn't get added to your calendar automatically. It's similar to some of the other meetings where in the past we have done a Teams meeting. So if you're in Outlooks, it would just add it. But because it's no longer Teams, underneath that join button in that email invite that you received, there's a little link to add it to your calendar that you would click on, and then there's a way you can. If you download Zoho Meeting, it will just automatically be in your meeting registries and things like that. But you can also just import it into your regular Outlook or Gmail calendars, similar to like Zoom meetings and whatnot. But we found that Zoho for us has worked a little bit better to be able to get people direct access without having to worry about system-related admin security settings where you can actually interact with the Q&A. We had some challenges in the Teams meetings where people weren't able to interact, and so wanted to make sure we were giving people the opportunity to say something or present a question. But
yeah, so far so good. So I'm sharing my screen, Brian, and tell me if you see anything on your end.
I can see your screen, and then I also see the little pop-up window with me and Fernando in it. You might want to just minimize that. Yeah, or move that around. Perfect. So that looks great.
Okay. Well, as I said, I went against the grain here, but it'll keep me on track, because otherwise I'll start talking about dirt bikes and things that aren't relevant. So
no worries. Maybe while we're just waiting here for a second, as you've been preparing this and getting the information put together, what are have you had any just thoughts come to your mind about, like, hey, this is the main thing I want people to feel as we're walking through this, just while it's fresh?
It's funny you bring that up. I was out for a walk around the block with my wife last night, and we do this funny thing. It's going to sound really crazy, but we've got this little baby what is it? A stroller. Shows how long it's been since I've had a baby. But anyway, a stroller. And we have two cats. As we've talked about cats in various meetings, Brian, so you know about the cats, and I've got two of them that are a little bit too wild to go out in the front yard. They'll probably take off and go get hit by a car. So we got this stroller that can be zipped up and closed entirely. We put the two cats in the stroller and we go for a walk in the evening. And it gives them a chance to smell the smells and hear the sounds and see the sights and stimulates them a little bit. And this just gives us an excuse to get out together, me and my wife. So anyway, last night we had some dark clouds coming over here in Utah. There has not really been any serious weather in a very long time, sadly. It's very dry here in the West. And we were watching the dark clouds come in. And of course, anytime those type of elements come into play, storms are rolling in, maybe a little bit of thunder and lightning, there's a certain energy in the air. So it was one of those moments that when we were out walking, there was this sense of, something pending, not doom, but something exciting. And the exciting thing was this webinar. So long story short, we're out walking and my wife started asking me questions about the webinar about Lightspeed, and a few things came to light. One of which, now, a lot of what I'm about to say now, I'm going to bring up as we get onto the actual webinar, so I'll probably refer back to this a little bit in a moment. But as some of you may know, and you may know this too, Brian, and I've certainly said this in previous meetings before, on camera. Lightspeed's been around for 43 years, so lots of tenure in the industry. It started out as a parts tool. It honestly, when it was first released as a consumer-facing software program back in 1983, it was focused on parts. It was a parts inventory management tool at its core. And to this day, it's kind of built around that. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today comes from some of the theories that were around back in 1983 and things that we've learned over the last 43 years to emphasize and to create efficiencies in that area. But I think this is where my wife started asking questions, and I remember the term or the name Parts Buddy. Now, I think there's some legend and lore around that, but if I'm not mistaken, and somebody in the audience may correct me, but back in 1983, when Ernie Blodgett was typing away on this old-fangled computer thing, whatever it was back then, to build what would then become Lightspeed at some point. It was called Parts Buddy initially. And then over time, of course, it became Lightspeed, and there's a story behind that too, which I'll get to in a moment. But we eventually added a service, a sales, and accounting module on top of the parts tool, but it started out really as a parts tool. And so a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today really are kind of throwbacks to best practices that have really been in the industry for decades, and some of the things that we've learned as we add new technologies and we learn new things about the industry that we serve. And all of those things are going to kind of be brought to light and served up in this webinar. So that's a long answer to your question.
No, that's super helpful. So I guess I only have one follow-up question.
Yeah.
How much of that did the cats catch? Right?
Good question.
So
yeah, good question. Yeah, so I think my wife was drawing up the history of Lightspeed, and it was surfacing things that I hadn't thought about in a while. But I don't know why I brought the cats into the converation. It just was setting the stage for
how it started. No, and you're good. And I think I also shared with you. And also for the audience, I'm also a cat person. I've got 3 cats at home, and I've got 18 feral cats outside of my house that I ended up feeding. I thought it was one with like a couple of kittens, and we felt bad because it looked like it was going to die, and didn't have food and water. And we started feeding it, and all of a sudden 18 show up, and man, just
well, you should know
crazy.
Better.
I should know better. And I don't have a stroller, but I do have a backpack that I put my cats in, and I walk around the block, kind of a similar thing. So now we're going to have to see, if gonna have to ask ChatGPT or Claude or something to see if cat strollers and cat backpacks increase over the next couple of days with our audience.
That might be the case.
Right?
That might be. Yeah, I think the backpack's a good idea. I've seen some folks downtown that are carrying their cat in a backpack that has kind of this glass bubble on it, and the cat's just in there. I feel like it should have a little helmet on or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, maybe we've got some riders out there that they'll throw their cat on a backpack as they're motorcycling, but that might be a little much.
Yeah, maybe. You never know. No, but the stroller's great. So if anybody's thinking about that, I got it on Amazon. I think it was like $40. 2 medium-sized cats fit in it, and they absolutely love it. So, and it's got a couple of spots for sodas and a basket for when you're getting the mail. And, this time of year, some mosquito repellent sits in that basket too. So.
There you go. All right. Well, we got about 1 minute before we kick off for everybody. Just while you're kind of getting used to this new meeting room, if you haven't been in a Zoho meeting before, there is a chat and a Q&A. And so either one of those, feel free to be posting comments, whether you want to add some input from your side, or maybe you hear another dealer say something and you want to contribute to that conversation. That's pretty easy to do. It's inside the chat and respond to specific individuals. The Q&A is one I'll be monitoring a little bit more, and I'll repeat this here in another minute or so. But if you want to go ahead and jump in there and start to look at those. But maybe another quick question for you, Brian.
Yeah.
Related to parts. What if you could name one thing that dealers, like when they first move into Lightspeed, and like what would be like if you could say there's one thing that they should do first to learn parts better, apart from maybe rewatching this webinar or a different webinar, but what would maybe be the one thing that you would hope that they grasp onto first?
Specifically around parts, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a really great question. There's a number of things that come to mind. I guess I would urge folks to recognize the value of maintaining their inventory, regular maintenance, whether it's counts, whether it's checking on your escalators, whether it's checking on your price books, which those are things we're going to talk about today. Understanding the value of price books. And if you are an OEM dealer, if you're working with third-party companies that provide aftermarket parts and accessories, Lightspeed has over 450 different partnerships with companies that are providing data into your Lightspeed system to give you up-to-date pricing, cost, supersession information, which is another thing we're going to talk about today, and a lot of other detail that's pertinent to being successful in the parts department. So I think organizing things and understanding the flow of parts, and the flow is probably going to come with time, but initially just understanding the lay of the land, which is where we're going to start today. The key elements: what is a part number, what is cost, what is retail, what are some best practices around suggested retail pricing in your dealership, and what are things you should consider with all of those things. So that's kind of a lengthy answer, but there's probably a lot of things I would say that a dealer should know about when it comes to parts when they're starting out.
Gotcha. Perfect.
And we'll talk about all those things today.
Perfect. Well, let's maybe go ahead and now that it's one past the hour here, it looks like we got a good group with us so far. So we'll go ahead and kind of repeat a few things for those who just joined a second ago. But welcome to our webinar. This is the Three Amigos webinar. One of the Amigos is out solving crime somewhere else for a minute. Mark Sheffield. He might jump back in here kind of on the back half of the webinar. I'm Brian Lucas. I'm one of the partners here at the Accounting Guys. We do a lot of Lightspeed specific training and accounting focused operational training. Brian Tierney with us. He's the go-to guy, I would say. So you got Brian and Brian, but Lucas and Tierney, you'll often hear us refer to our last names here. Brian Tierney, one, has the best radio voice in town. Like it's just, if you didn't know, now you know, or you've probably heard that. But he also, apart from that, is extremely well versed in Lightspeed and all facets of Lightspeed, has done thousands of demos and has worked in Lightspeed for decades in a lot of different capacities. So he's lived in your shoes, and now he is training people to be able to hopefully fill those shoes as well. And so very excited to have Brian Tierney kind of walk us through the parts department. The title for today's session is Turn Your Parts Department into a Profit Machine, and really diving deep into some of those areas. And for the attendees in this webinar, we have a couple of ways for you to participate. There is a chat option, and we would encourage you to chat amongst each other. If you have questions or have input and want to, provide, different things as Brian's making suggestions, or if you find, you're struggling with something, you can ask some questions there as well. There is a Q&A option where you can submit a question, and I'll be monitoring those along with Fernando Valenzuela from my team, who is also available to kind of help us in there. And we'll try to take some of those questions and answer them live as well. There is a lot of content that I know Brian has prepared for this, so I want to make sure that we get through that as well. But you can use either of those options to interact with us today, and feel free to start posting those as you hear them, so you don't forget them. The webinar is being recorded. This will be shared. It'll be on our YouTube channel. Lightspeed will also host it on the resources page where they have their webinars and content available as well once that gets shared out. This series, so if you have subscribed and if you're joining this meeting today, you're automatically enrolled to all of the following events in these series. And so we put it out there for a year to start. This one was on the third Wednesday, but all of the rest of them are going to be on the fourth Wednesday of each month. And so, and there's a couple months where it's on a Tuesday just because of where the holidays hit. But you're already registered for all of those, so you should just be receiving reminder emails. But if it's not on your calendar, let us know. We can help you get that on your calendar. When you receive the invitation for the meeting, the same spot where you hit to join meeting, there should be a link just underneath it where you can click on that and then add that to your calendar so that it locks you down and make sure that you have that time protected. So with all that said, Brian Tierney, take it away.
Well, thanks for the very kind and generous introduction, Mr. Lucas. Appreciate that. And to speak to Mr. Sheffield, we understand he may be joining us at some point today, so we look forward to the third Amigo, or the first Amigo maybe. I don't know. Maybe he's the first Amigo, but he may be joining us later. And also, he has asked that we expand on one of the thoughts and theories that we're going to talk about in a separate webinar. And I'll introduce what that is in just a little bit. I know there's a lot of interest in some automation and inventory management, and Mark has developed a series of, I don't know, protocols that he's applied to dealerships he's worked for and dealers he's consulted with around the Lightspeed buying guide, and really wants to expand on that thought as we move forward into our future webinars. So we'll talk about that as we get into that portion of the demonstration, but I promise we will talk about the buying guide and reorder points today as part of our material. Now, I was looking at the chat. Before we dive in, I just want to address one thing because I knew this was going to come up, and I am in complete agreement with the person who's asking the question. And I'm going to just flash my email address on the screen here. And I should check, Mr. Lucas. You can see if I'm moving things around. Can you see?
Yes.
My email address on there? Okay.
Yep.
So there's a question around, are we ever going to see parts variable updating in the current platform of Lightspeed? And we do hear you. We have lots of folks asking for that. We may see that in the future, but if you'd like, if you would like to set up a cadence where we can provide updates on subjects like that, please send me an email and I'll be happy to follow up on any of those requests or anything that comes up today. And I'll flash this up again later on in case anybody didn't catch it. But Brian Tierney, Brian.Tierney at lightspeeddms.com if you'd like some follow-up on upcoming functionality. So I appreciate that question. So with that, Mr. Lucas has kind of introduced the subject matter. Let's talk about today's agenda. And we are learning together about Zoho. I want to test one more thing, Brian, before I dive in so that I don't get surprised. Can you see Lightspeed?
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay. And can you see the mobile app?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, then we're in business. All right, so today's agenda, and there's really 3 bullet points on the screen here, but each of those bullet points contains a ton of detail. So as Mr. Lucas mentioned, there's a lot to talk about, and we're going to try to cover everything today, and there will probably be questions. There might be some follow-up we need to provide. We certainly be happy to do that. But we're going to spend some time talking about the fundamentals. What is in a parts record? What are the key things that we should be focused on? Like part numbers, costs, bin locations. What are those things and what do they look like? Where do they live in the system? And also a couple of things that maybe you hadn't considered when it comes to parts inventory. Along with some of the newer features in Lightspeed, parts kits and supersessions, which isn't that new. Similar parts, there is a brand new feature that coincides with the similar part function. I'll be able to show you what that looks like today. A little bit of modern technology, a little bit of a spin on similar parts. We'll talk about that. We will talk about the science of stocking, and that's really where the buying guide lives, reorder points, understanding what your top selling parts look like, which ones you're not selling, and maybe should consider offloading in some fashion. We'll talk about those things. I'm also going to introduce, so back to the parts inventory variable updating that used to live in NXT, there is a parts inventory management tool that lives in the current iteration of Lightspeed. Some folks may not have seen this before. We're gonna spend a little bit of time in there to show you that there is some mass updating available within Lightspeed for parts inventory. Now, this is a very dangerous place to tread in, so I will preface by saying be careful who has access to this because lots of crazy bad things can happen if the wrong person gets their hands into it. So we'll just preface by saying that. And then we'll talk about pricing, controls, escalations. We'll talk about the difference between margin and markup, and give you some things to consider as you're setting pricing within your dealership. So that's a lot. That's kind of bouncing around the system a little bit in parts, but I think it will hopefully give somebody and everybody on the call a little bit of something to take away from today's webinar. So with that, we're going to start on the parts fundamentals, and we're going to kind of walk through a parts inventory record, talk about the key elements that really everybody should be aware of if you're working in the parts department, if you're a manager, if you're a controller, even desk agents might have access to some of these things. Some of them maybe not so much. We'll talk about what those things might be. We will talk about parts kits. And that's been a question that's come up a lot in circles that I swim in here at Lightspeed, actually twice this month. Parts kits, but more specifically, kits within kits. And the first time I got asked that question, a dealer says, do you guys have kits within kits? And I thought, is this some kind of a puzzle you're trying to present to me? And in some ways, I guess it is, but there does seem to be some interest in kits within kits. And I'll expand on that thought and see if it makes sense to the audience and see if it maybe be something you ought to consider for your parts department. We'll talk about supersession chains, and we're going to talk about similar parts. Now, there is a new element to the similar parts piece we're going to talk about today. that is grabbing information from your third-party companies and marrying that information automatically to OEM parts. Now, this function lives in power sports specifically today, but it will expand into other industries. The vision being I can look up an OEM part number, and Lightspeed's going to provide me alternative Western Power, Parts Unlimited, Turn 14, or other supplier tools that are aftermarket equivalents to it. That might be more affordable to the consumer, might even give me a better markup or margin on the part as I sell it. So we'll show you what that looks like today. And then we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart. Hopefully everybody knows about the Parts Locator. We're going to talk about some things that you should know about to be effective with your part locator and showcasing what you have on your shelf. Sometimes I call them my crusty, dusty old parts that I would love to get rid of. We'll talk about some ways that you can make sure that you're getting rid of some of those crusty, dusty, old, obsolete parts, and also give you some suggestions on how you can find parts more effectively if you're looking for that lost, back-ordered, or discontinued item somewhere in the world. So we'll talk about all those things. So let's go ahead and dive in. And we're going to show you Lightspeed. Hopefully Lightspeed's up on the screen now. I think it is.
Yep.
Awesome. So let's dive into a parts inventory record just for a moment, and we're just going to kind of key in on a couple of elements that I think everybody probably knows about if you're using Lightspeed today, and if you've ever stepped foot inside of a parts department, you probably have spent some time looking at some of these things, and maybe I'm going to show you some things you hadn't thought about. And as we go into a parts inventory record, you know the basics. You've got a part number. I will sometimes refer to that as the primary key. And when I talk about primary keys and part numbers, especially when we're talking supersessions, similar parts, or the part locator, that's going to be very important that that number be consistent with price books and be consistent with what other dealers are using. And I can say from my experience, I was a parts guy for a lot of years. Sometimes we'd get creative and we'd add elements to part numbers to make them useful for whatever reasons, for bulk items or for mass quantity items. As soon as you edit the primary key, you're kind of hiding it from the rest of the world. And you're also disconnecting it potentially from price book updating. So those are things to think about. I'll go into more detail about that in a moment. Secondary, I'm going to show you how we can employ that. Generally, secondary in this world is what your OEM part number or the manufacturer part number is, but it can also be used as a shortcut. So it's a couple of different things to different people. We'll talk about that as we go through an invoicing screen. UPC code is your barcode. And so those are just some of the basics, but I'm going to point to the things that I think are relevant really for today's conversation that maybe expands on the thought of being successful and innovative and effective in your parts department. Now, I'll point to over on the right side of the screen, your cost and standard price. Standard price is the retail price, generally your MSRP from your price book providers, but Lightspeed provides a series of different sales special pricing that you can apply to inventory records and back to that mass updating tool. If I have a tent sale in the parking lot or an offsite sale, or maybe just for this Saturday, we're going to put all of our chainsaw parts on sale, you can essentially run a SQL through Lightspeed that's going to update all your pricing based on specific characteristics or traits like categories or supplier code, set a sale price temporarily, and then relieve it when Monday rolls around back to MSRP. So we'll talk a little bit about what that mass update tool looks like, but those are things to be aware of. Quantities are also a thing that comes up a lot in circles that I swim in when it comes to consulting and demonstrating and talking about the product. Available on-hand quantities. And we're going to spend a minute on why those might be the same or might be different across the system. On-hand quantities essentially showing what's physically in the store. Available quantities showing what you physically could sell right now if you had a consumer walk into the store. And sometimes those are the same, sometimes they're not. And I'm guessing some folks on the call know why that might be the case, but some may not know why. And on order just simply shows how many of those parts we have on order and how many would be available when they arrive if there's not a name attached to them and I could sell them to a customer. So on order available is a critical number, especially when it comes to reorder points. So those are just a couple of basic things to consider, basic ideas that probably most people on the call already know about. Bin locations, where is the part located? Maybe I've got that part showcased on my front parts counter in some display. Maybe I've got one on display on a mannequin in the front window of the showroom floor, and then I've got a box of them in the back. So I potentially could have 3 different locations where parts live. One of the critical pieces, this is newer to some folks and newer really to Lightspeed. New, and I've been in the Lightspeed world for 31 years, so 10 years ago was new to me. But nonetheless, package information, the ability to set mass quantity updates. And so, for example, if I'm ordering an item And when it gets delivered to me, they deliver me 12 in a box. I might use package information to prevent myself from ordering 12 boxes of 12, and I might only want one box of 12. And it does some of the math for you as you're building your orders. And we'll show you some examples of what that looks like in just a moment. But the other beauty of package information is as you're receiving those items, if it is a bulk item, barrels of oil, boxes of chemicals, spark plugs, taillight lenses, things that come in mass, it's also going to divide the cost and retail price of those parts when you're receiving, reduces a little bit of the labor during the receiving process. So a lot of this information comes from your price book providers, but not from everybody. So just kind of be aware of what package information looks like. We'll come back to this in a moment. Reorder method. Now, I mentioned this is going to be an element that keys in or ties into the buying guide as we move into reorder points in just a moment, automation and managing your inventory. And we want to probably set some time aside for Mark to go through his buying guide experience and some things he's learned about using the buying guide over the years. But this is going to hint to some of those things we're going to talk about: sales curve, 4:1, min-max. So as I'm looking at the overview, all of those things that I just kind of pointed to are things that most folks on the call probably know about and you should have access to and be experimenting with. Now, one of the things that I would urge folks to be cautious of is who you give access to making manual entries, manual adjustments to inventory. Back when I first started in the parts department at a motorcycle store, I started in 1995. And it was really my first exposure to any kind of computer, any kind of software at all. The high school I went to, we really didn't have any computers, didn't really grow up with a computer. So I remember getting behind the parts counter of a motorcycle store on day one of my first job in the industry and having to cashier a parts invoice in the old Lightspeed Unix program. And I was so proud of myself because I actually succeeded and sold a part and couldn't believe that I did it. So, but back in those days, I also had access to every single thing in the system. Now, that was the Unix days. Things were a little bit different in. I used to ride a horse and buggy to work through the snow uphill both ways back in those days. Now I drive a car to work through the snow uphill both ways, but things have changed. And back in those days, I used to be able to go in and willy-nilly change inventory counts at will. And why is that dangerous? Well, sometimes those things could slip in a person's pocket and out the door. Sometimes those just don't need to be adjusted. They really need a manager to look at them, because every time I make an adjustment to that count, I'm having an impact on financials. I'm having a fairly significant impact on the total business. So be wary of that. We might talk about security and permissions around that. So just kind of be careful about who you give access to adjusting inventory. Now, that said, if somebody does make an adjustment, I want to introduce something that some of you may know about, some of you may not. Detail history. Every time a part gets touched, a cost changes, a category changes, a part gets ordered, sold. Anytime a part really gets touched in a financial way that's going to impact the general ledger or impact inventory, there's an audit trail for that. So you will find out if somebody did make an adjustment. You're going to see the time and date stamp that they did it and the whodunit stamp. And you'll be able to track down the person that did that thing and maybe go ask them the question. And also, of course, if I hit the little blue hyperlink on this page, it does open up the source document that shows me the invoice, maybe the purchase order, or any relevant information around that adjustment that was made in the system. I can quickly access that, even reprint and email copies of that to the pertinent individual. So we'll talk a little bit about history and some audit tools and some ways to manage inventory, and it does relate to this. History and ordering is another thing that a lot of folks are going to know about. This is really going to tie into the buying guide, but we're going to want to be aware that you are keeping track of 12 months worth of sales history. And that 12 months worth of sales history and that number over on the upper right corner of the screen is contributing to reorder points. And we'll talk about what that means in just a little bit. You see all your history for purchase orders, special orders, all the individual sold quantities across this and last year's calendar. And yes, you will see plus or minus adjustment values. This screen doesn't really key into the whodunit, the timestamp, the date stamp portion, but it does give you relevant information to see, are we manually updating our inventory, and to the tune of, in this case, 238 times in the plus year to date. Sample environment, so that's kind of an unusual situation. Hopefully you're not seeing a lot of that. Let's talk a minute for just a moment about similar parts. And I'm going to roll into a parts invoice screen and really showcase the power of similar parts and talk about one of the new elements that live in Lightspeed. So let's go to parts, and I'm going to open up a parts invoice for just a moment. And as I do, I may open up my electronic parts catalog. As you may know, Lightspeed plugs into a series of different browser-based EPCs, electronic parts catalogs, from some of the OEMs you work with, Honda, Yamaha, for example, Mercury. But we also work with some third-party companies like Parts Manager Pro and Parts Smart, and as well as Service Manager Pro. So when you launch your EPC, and it's browser-based, it's going to open up the internet, and it's going to take you to whatever your flavor of the month electronic parts catalog tool is, and it's going to allow you to then look up the catalogs, pick your parts, and drop them into a shopping cart and send them back to Lightspeed. And I won't go through too much of this detail because some of this you probably already know, but I want to get to kind of the punchline of why this is relevant. But I might look up a motorcycle, pick up a few parts from the list, drop them in my shopping cart, and then send them back to Lightspeed. And when I've done one of those items, when I've selected an item and sent it back to the system, ultimately I see something that looks like this on my parts invoice. The part number I've selected. Of course, I see description, current pricing, might even see cost. Now, if you are seeing cost, that's because your permissions are turned on and allowing you to see that. Just so folks know, if you right-click on this dark blue bar across the top of the columns on the parts invoice, it brings up a column options menu. And if you want to temporarily hide that cost, because as you know, and I know full well, having been a parts guy for 16 years, when I'm keying in part numbers and I'm jabber-jawing with a customer, 9 out of 10 times, maybe 9.5 out of 10 times, that customer is looking around the counter to see what I'm typing on the screen. And hopefully I've got Lightspeed up and not a video game or a YouTube video, because that's possible too. But at this point, I might have Lightspeed up on the screen, and I'm going to remove cost so it's not visible to the customer as they're looking at the screen. So a little tip from Uncle Brian here, just in case you didn't know about that. But back to the relevant information. I'm looking at a part number that the EPC sent back to the invoice screen. The bad news is it says I don't have one in stock, so I could potentially special order that part. However, if I come down to the bottom of the screen where these little green indicators are yelling at me to tell me, hey, I've got some information for you about this part, Brian. Well, if I hit the similar part button, I can see, do I have a similar part in my parts library from another OEM? Like maybe it is a Honda bearing that I'm looking for, but Kawasaki uses the same bearing, and so does Suzuki, and so does Yamaha. And the Smart Cross-Reference tool, which is data that's provided by Lightspeed, is giving me those cross-references, and I didn't have to go and manually create these relationships. Lightspeed made this for me. Where historically, why I'm emphasizing that, this was the labor of the parts department to have to make these relationships, and that was the case for me back in my horse and buggy and snow uphill both ways days. But now that we're driving cars to work, some of us, like Mr. Lucas, flies a helicopter to work, but those of us that are driving cars, we now have the data showing up in the screen. And I can see, well, do I have the Kawasaki, do I have the Suzuki, or maybe do I have a third party or aftermarket equivalent to it that might save my customer some money? Sadly, I don't have any of them, but it does give me that cross-reference information fed to me right on the Lightspeed screen. And for those of you that are using it, bravo. For those of you that aren't, give that a try. I'm just going to show you an alternative to the Honda bearing. Now, this part is a little bit different. Going back to primary keys, you can see it's very simple. 1, 2, 3 is probably not a real part number anywhere on any price book. Actually, probably is, but not price books that people find that relevant. And this might be a part that we built in-house. And I can even attach similar parts to that. I can say that this part is similar to maybe a Skidoo belt or a Toro belt or maybe a third-party belt. And I can still get that similar parts relationship even over and above the Lightspeed Smart Cross-Reference detail. So that technology still lives in the system. And I would encourage you to build those. If you are interested in this subject, send me an email and I'll be happy to go over more detail about how to make those relationships. I know back in my day when I was a parts guy, sometimes we would enter tire sizes as a part number. And when I would enter a tire size, it would show me in the similar parts chain every single tire that I had in stock that fit that size. So that's a little bit outside the scope of what the software was written. If we look at best practices documentation, doesn't say anything about that anywhere, but I know dealerships get creative when it comes to similar parts. Those are just a couple of things to think about. Now, supersessions dance in similar circles to similar parts. And I remember working in support, and customers would call and they would have conflicts. Should this be a supersession? Should it be a similar part? And really the answer is it's going to be a matter of, did the part number that you're looking for replace a previous part, or are you looking for a replacement for the version of that part that's discontinued or maybe has lead paint in it. Now they make a version that doesn't have lead paint in it. Maybe you know these things, maybe you don't. But one of the cool things about our price book relationships and price books, just for food for thought, for those of you that aren't familiar with the term, I think everybody is, but in parts, you're going to have your parts inventory, and we surfed around in parts inventory a moment ago. That's where all of your inventory records are that you currently have on hand. Anything that has any historical relevance to parts lives in parts inventory. Every time you look up a part number in the system, by the way, it's building that list. It may not put those parts into an on-hand count, but it's expanding your library a little bit every time you look up a part. Price books. Price books is the data feed from your third-party and OEM companies that are fed into your system as frequently as every single night with some of our OEMs and third-party companies, updating cost of retail, updating supersession information. And now with Smart Cross-Reference, it's going to be updating a little bit of those relationships. But supersessions is generally a function of price books. It's fed to us by the OEMs, maybe in some cases third parties. So back to the story.
Brian, can I pause you for 2 seconds? Because there's a question related to that, what you just said there. So if the new similar parts feature is activated with the current manual similar parts already entered in Lightspeed, will that be saved, or will the new feature override the current setting?
It kind of just adds to it. So what you'll end up seeing, and let me see if I've got an example of that. That's a great question. I ran into that this morning when I was playing around in the sample data. Oh, that's a bad example. Well, I'll just show this to you anyway. We'll try to find an example as we move on, but you'll notice the type, XREF. That's kind of the new technology. That's the new cool driving the car to work feature. Now, if it was something that you built, you determined that these two items are similar, and yes, they are, and it works great. You're going to see a type that says similar, and it just adds to the length or the number of items that are in that list. So you'll retain what you've always had, and then you'll get the additional details from our cross-reference.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Very cool. All right. So back to our story, NeedleJet. And when I'm looking at on the screen, I just want to make sure, is this the most relevant? Is this the newest? Is this the one that I can get from the manufacturer? In this case, it's Honda. Well, over on the bottom of the screen, again, those green lights are flashing, yelling at me and saying, hey, Tierney, look at me. So I do look at them, and I hit Supersession or hit the Supersede button. And I can see that there is a series of supersession chains, or there is a supersession chain, not a series of, there's one chain. And a chain is really from part 1 to part 2 to part 3 to part 4. And in some OEMs, I won't name names, you know who you are, there might be dozens of them in a list, okay? And at the top of the supersession chain is the origin. So back to Parts Buddy and Ernie Blodgett typing away on his goofy, fangled Star Wars computer in 1983. Building Lightspeed. So maybe this was the part back in 1983, but here in 2026, we've replaced it with the hot new thing. And at the end of the chain, the thing at the bottom of the supersession list, that's the most relevant, the most pertinent, the one that's still available from the OEM. So if you're looking at the list, the one at the bottom is the one you want. And if you try to get the old one, well, it may give you some information. And when you order it, chances are they're going to send you the superseded version of it. And there might be a price difference, and that might be a hard conversation with your customer. So things to be aware of, just kind of be aware when your little green lights start yelling at you at the bottom of the screen, press those lights and see what they're trying to tell you, and make sure that you're ordering or selling maybe the most recent part. Sometimes folks will say to me, well, Tierney, why don't you just delete the old data from the system so that I don't make those mistakes? And I would love to say, well, that's a great idea, and you're right. It makes sense. But there are lots of dealers, and this will take us to the conversation about Parts Locator in a moment. There's lots of dealers that have this old inventory on their shelf, and they're still relevant to those dealerships. So we can't necessarily eliminate the part from the system because we still want it to be there for those folks that have that old inventory. But if you're going to be replenishing your inventory, you're going to try to order the most relevant, most recent stuff. The supersession chain, the bottom of that chain is going to be their most recent one if you need a new one. Okay? So hopefully that helps. All right, so speaking of Parts Locator, I'm just going to put an example of a part number that I often utilize to demonstrate Parts Locator. And usually the story I tell around Parts Locator in this, guys, is I'm selling some parts to a customer, and customer says, well, I need a tire for my motorcycle. Do you happen to have one? So maybe I refer to my Parts Unlimited catalog, or I open up, back in my day, the horse and buggy days, they used to have paper catalogs on the parts counter, and we have to turn pages and look up part numbers on these paper calendars or paper catalogs. Or nowadays, boys and girls are going out to the internet and they're seeing digital catalogs and they have new reference tools and they have electronic parts catalogs that feed this information into the system. And I'm being very sarcastic to say that, but it's pretty awesome. But nonetheless, I look up a part number, put it on the inventory screen. It serves up my description, serves up my retail price. And the bad news, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, is I don't have that tire in stock. So I can't sell you something I don't have. So therefore, there's a 0 showing up on my sold column on the invoice and a 1 showing up in SO. Everybody knows that's special order on the invoice. Well, whenever I introduce that thought to a customer, technician, or a consumer, they're going to say, well, how long is it going to take to get it? On the bottom of the screen, as you know, you press that warehouse, dealer, or store locator, and the parts locator is going to tell you if the wholesaler, does the OEM, does the third-party company have it in their inventory. And if they have more than 9, just in case you didn't know this, it might say a 9 plus. We're never going to show more than 9, but if they've got 10,000 on their shelf, it's going to say 9. If they have 3 on the shelf, well, it'll say 3. So we'll never show you more than 9. And that's a little bit of privacy for the vendor too, I think. At least that's what I've heard. But in this example, well, Parts Unlimited's got multiple warehouses where that tire could be, but the bad news for this particular tire is they are completely out of stock. I can't get it. It's back ordered. Maybe it's discontinued. Maybe it's been superseded to the next Dunlop. Well, the good news is here's some dealerships in maybe my city, state, or town that have that part on their shelf. In fact, there's one that's not too far away. It's far, maybe not as the crow flies, but nonetheless, 2 in stock at this Grand Junction store, and I could call them or email them and say, hey, Lightspeed says you have this part. Would you sell it to me? Now, sometimes dealers will say to me, well, do they sell it to me at cost? And that's a great question. That's really a decision that the dealer that's selling it to you will make. They could, if you have a great relationship with them. But the question that I would ask to you is if somebody asks you, do you have a part in stock that some other dealer wants? Would you sell it to them at cost? I don't know. It's a perplexing question. But nonetheless, the vision here is we can find parts that we're looking for from some of our fellow Lightspeed stores across the North America continent to the tune of 4,600 of them right now. And if we're lucky enough to have multiple rooftops, well, store number 1 doesn't have the tire, but store number 2's got one. I'm going to drive over and I'll have it here later this afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. So again, one of my favorite parts of the whole Lightspeed system is Part Locator. I think there's tremendous value. And then going back to primary key, was we were talking about part numbers and we were talking about this line here, the part number line. And I sometimes refer to that as primary key. The way the part locator works, and one thing you'll want to be aware of, is the only way anybody's going to know you have a part is when they're looking up a part in their Lightspeed system and there's a match for that primary key somewhere in your inventory. If you're using goofy homemade part numbers for your inventory items, nobody's ever going to find that through Parts Locator because nobody knows what your goofy homemade part numbers are. So keep that in mind. You want to use relevant OEM and third-party part numbers so that Part Locator can find you. And when you're entering a part number that you might be looking for on the invoice screen, Locator will serve up information about places in the world where that part lives. So that's going to be important. And I know there's a number of relevant reasons why people kind of make up their own part numbers. One is parts kits, which is going to take us into that subject. So kind of going back, I'm just going to flash this up on the screen again. Everybody take a sip.
While you're moving to that, just a question related to parts kits that I don't know the answer to. Are they considering adding parts kits to service where you can add them to a standard job? So
yes. Yeah, great question. And if you'd like, whomever's asked that question, if you want to email me, I'll send you updates on that. It is definitely something that we hear. I hear quite frequently every week, questions from consumers, dealers that want that. I don't know where it's on the roadmap, but following this meeting, if anybody wants to email me, I'll flash this up on the screen now. I'll follow up with an email as to when that's going to be available. To tie that together to what exists in service today, and you may already know this, but I'm just going to take us full circle on that question. So the answer today is no, parts kits don't function in service. However, what does function in service and is very close are what we call standard jobs. And a standard job not only contains the relevant parts, so think the parts kit attached to a standard job, but also labor lines, miscellaneous, and sublet charges that might apply to that job as a complete package. So it's kind of like taking a parts kit and expanding on it with additional relevant details. But to the question, no, parts kits don't live there yet, but they're coming. They're coming. So please, if you'd like some more information on that, send me an email and I'll update you later. Awesome. I forgot where I was going. Parts kits. Okay, parts kits. And then the one thing that I've been asked, as I mentioned, frequently this month, frequently 2 times, it's not that frequent, but enough to be relevant, is parts kits within kits. So I'm going to expand on the kits idea to show you an example of what a kit within a kit might be and why does anybody care about that. So let's talk about relevance and really what it means. So we're going to clear some tabs on the screen because I'm a bit anal about having too many tabs. All right, so situation is customer walks up to the counter and says, I need a fan belt for my machine. Do you happen to have one in stock? And so maybe I go back in the back and grab it. Maybe I look it up. But I put that part number on the screen. It brings up the description, selling price, on-hand quantities. And, you know, being a thorough professional salesperson of a parts guy, right? A couple things that in parts management that I've found to be relevant, and what I always coach folks to do is increase the average lines per ticket. You never want to just have one part number on the parts invoice. Sometimes you can't avoid it. But if you can increase the parts lines per invoice to somewhere around 3, so get your average lines to somewhere around 3, 4, or even more, the more the better. Well, that's more revenue for the business. It's faster turn rates for parts. It's going to generate more income for everybody in the business. So increase your average lines per ticket. And here's an example of how you might do that. Customer needs a fan belt. And, you know, as I'm talking to the customer, I say, you know, I've noticed that everybody that buys these fan belts also replaces the bushing and the pulley. Have you thought about replacing those too? And the guy or gals, everybody's price conscious, especially with gas being $30 a gallon these days. They're going to say, well, I don't know, should I? And I'm going to say, you're darn right you should. Otherwise, your machine's going to blow up. So I might go down to the bottom of the screen because I'll notice that this part number turns on some green lights. And one of those green lights is parts kit. If I click that parts kit number, there's actually 3 different kits attached to this part. And this is kind of where the kits within a kits concept comes from. Now, the initial kit is a kit that we call belt and pulley kit, and it sells for $48.99. And I can see that that's got a price override, which indicates to me as the viewer of the Lightspeed screen that there's a slight savings in cost or price to the consumer if they buy everything. And it's somewhere around $2 or $3. So if you buy all 4 pieces, Mr. Customer, we're going to save you a couple bucks, and you're going to get everything you need so that your machine doesn't blow up. So that parts kit includes the fan belt, the pulley, the bushing, and the gasket, everything you need to keep that vehicle on the road and rocking and rolling. Then you're going to have the guy or gal that comes in and says, you know what, I should have took your advice. I replaced that belt, but my motor blew up. Or I've got this other squeaky problem going on, and now I need to spend a little more money. So the kit within a kit was the belt and pulley that's part of this compressor kit. Now, the initial kit, the belt and pulley, is all part of this compressor version, the same belt, the same pulleys, the same gasket, but now Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer needs a compressor because they waited too long. If they'd replaced the bushing and the pulley, they might not have had to replace the compressor. So now it's $220, Mr. Customer, instead of $49. I'm sorry, you should have listened to me. And things get worse too. So maybe not only did my compressor blow up, but my radiator exploded too. So things get really ugly at this point. And now Mr. Customer not only needs the kit within a kit within a kit, but he needs the belt, pulley, bushing, gasket, compressor, and a radiator. And the price just keeps going up. Yes, those are price overridden. So customer is getting a bit of a discount. They buy all the pieces, but okay, worst case scenario, I need the whole shooting kit and caboodle. So I hit okay. And when I do that, I get all the relevant part numbers that pull up on the screen. Now, sometimes I've gotten questions when I've displayed this to folks that say, well, why don't I just get one part number on the screen with a description and a selling price? Well, a couple reasons. We want to be able to track reorder points and individual sales history per part number. That's going to be a relevant thing that management's looking at. Do we sell a lot of this gasket? Do we sell a lot of this radiator? Should it be something we stock? Reorder points are going to be attached to every single component of a kit. So we want to make sure that we're tracking those, and the only way to really track them effectively is through a parts invoice, hence why they all show up on here. But also, we never want to run out of parts, components of kits. When a customer comes in and you have an opportunity to sell this full kit, and gosh, you're out of the radiator, you know, going back to the reorder points and tracking individual histories, you've missed out on an opportunity because you've sold out of radiators and you didn't reorder them. So you're not only maybe putting the customer at risk, but you're also risking not making the revenue and all of that stuff. So that's kind of why. But that is an example of parts kits within kits. And in terms of where those live and where they're set up, just to kind of point out where they live in Lightspeed. So if you go into parts If you're interested in setting some of those kits up and you come down to lists and parts kits, that's where the setup point for those lives. And I would encourage you, if you haven't experimented, if you haven't looked at these before, go in there. You can click the new button and you can just kind of start building some things. An example, back in the horse and buggy days when two-strokes were king and Jeremy McGrath was still the king of Supercross and everything was great, two-stroke top end rebuild kits were just, we would sell dozens of those every day, and I still miss those days. But nonetheless, a top end rebuild kit, you can build all the components, your piston rings, circlips, bearings, and gaskets, and everything that comprises that kit. Make sure that you don't run out of those relevant parts and then sell them. Increasing average lines, increasing revenue, making everybody else happy, including the customer, and that's kind of the idea behind parts kits. Awesome. So I think we kind of beat the parts fundamentals to death. Any other questions on the out there, Lucas, that we can? Mr.
Just a
Lucas,
couple high level here,
Sure.
so or some maybe just to repeat. Will the similar part function be automatically activated, or do they need to do something for that?
It's automatically activated. Now, I did mention that it's right now in the power sports industry specifically, and we are going to expand that over time. So if you're in an RV business, a marine business, a golf business, you may not be able to take advantage of it right yet. But in power sports, you should start seeing it right away.
Perfect. And then somebody brought up, just can I see the category retail price or cost change in that inventory update detail history screen? And I believe the answer is for some of them, yes. Some of them, there's another location to look. I don't know if you want to touch on that for 2 seconds.
Sure. Yeah, you bet. Yeah. So when parts get updated by price books, what I would recommend is going to an adjustment report, and we will get to that a little bit later in the talk.
Perfect.
One of the reports that I recommend keeping tabs on, and you can even set up an alert that will alert you when price books have updated, so that you can go back and run your adjustment report. But I would say that's probably a better place to look than in that detail page. But great question.
I agree, because it gives you timestamp who did it and kind of everything related, plus all the other ones that adjusted, and they don't have to go and open up each individual part, but see here's all of them that changed. Good input there.
And it also gives you a connection to, if you're curious, there's probably not a ton of GL accounts attached to parts, maybe usually 2 or 3 at the most, but it'll also tell you what GL account was updated on that report.
Perfect.
That might be interesting to an accountant.
There's another question that might lead us into one of your next sections here as well. Just is the Lightspeed software capable, has portable scanners that can connect into it for inventory location and counting capabilities?
It does. The location piece, there is an asterisk, sadly. And this will be something I'll probably flash my email address on the screen again. We'll talk about. But yes, scanner capability, and we will talk about that. In fact, I was looking just out of curiosity on Amazon this morning to see what is an inventory scanner cost. And this is going to be incredibly important for those of you that start shopping. Because when you go on Amazon or you go to a big box store and you start looking at scanners, you can buy a scanner for $20, right? Just a simple digital scanner that has a USB plug on the side. Those are great for point of sale. Your customer walks up and has 30 T-shirts in their hand, and you go bip, 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 and scan it just like a grocery store. Those $20 ones work for that, but they do not work for walking around the shop and scanning barcodes and updating inventory. So, and it's kind of deceiving when you're looking at those online on Amazon as to whether that type of scanner is going to work or not. They won't. If you're looking online for a barcode scanner over and above the mobile app, which we will talk about the mobile app today and how you can use that for barcode scanning. And by the way, it's free. And there's a story there too. But if you go online, I saw on Amazon prices start on barcode scanners at about $65. And what'll be the giveaway as to whether it's going to work or not is it has a cradle that the scanner sits in. It's a wireless scanner with a cradle. And if it says the word inventory count in the description, you're golden if you want one of those. But I'll talk about the mobile app too, and that might be just a better option for everybody anyway. But great question. Well, I'm going to talk about the science of stocking and a little bit of an introduction into reorder points. And we're going to expand on this thought and theory on a future webinar. I don't know if it's the next one or the one after that, but very soon. Mr. Sheffield has a wealth of knowledge and experience in using the Lightspeed buying guide and a lot of use cases and suggestions. So as we release information on when that webinar is scheduled, I would make sure you attend that one, because there's really going to be some powerful, relevant information. We'll talk at a high level of what this function looks like. Some of you may know some of this stuff, some of you may not, because it is a fairly complex subject, but let's talk about it. So let's go back into Lightspeed. And I'm going to go back to our parts inventory list and just point to, we saw this a moment ago, but point to where the reorder point settings live in every single parts inventory record. So I'm going to pull up my goofy homemade part number here for a fan belt. And you'll notice on the bottom left side of the screen, there's a box that says reorder method. And there's 4. And I think whenever I talk to dealerships, whether it's in a consultation environment, a demonstration environment, training environment, most folks know about min-max. You know, the term min-max, it says minimum, maximum on the screen here. Most people are familiar with that. And that concept lives in a variety of different platforms, including Lightspeed, and it gives the dealer or gives the parts manager, whomever set those controls, more control over reorder points than maybe the other 3, maybe the other 1. That's probably more pertinent. So when I set something to min-max, I'll just kind of speak about this. Again, most folks probably have seen this. It's pretty common. Many dealers use these for a variety of parts. You can say, I never want to have less than 15 of this part in stock, but never more than 20. So it gives you control over keeping your inventory stock at a particular level. And when your inventory drops to, I'm going to make a manual adjustment here. I'm probably going to get my hand slapped, but that's okay. So I want to reduce my inventory to 10. Now that my on-hand value for that part has dropped below the minimum, the buying guide is going to want to replenish that stock, and it's going to order up to the maximum to replace my stock. And we're going to see what that looks like in just a moment. A couple of caveats. And this is where some confusion can come into play, and you may have wrangled with this before in your parts department. Supersessions and similar parts can have an impact on your reorder points. Okay? So if I go over to in this parts inventory record and I'm looking at similar parts and I have on-hand counts for these similar parts, the min-max is considering my similar parts, and it is either going to make a suggestion or not if I've got alternative parts available to sell. So keep that in mind. If you're running your buying guide, if you're running your reorder points and you're finding out this part that should be showing up on my list here is not showing up, check to see if you have anything in the similar chain that might be impacting it. Or you might have a supersession part. Going back to supersession details, in this example, there isn't one. But if you have one of those older versions of the part that's been around since 1983 and you got 50 of those sitting on your shelf, well, that's going to impact your reorder points on this part too. So there is a little bit of a chain that might have an impact on whether your parts get reordered or not. So keep that in mind if you're troubleshooting or looking at the buying guide. We'll get into the buying guide in a moment. The others, and I'll just flash the slide back up on the screen, force to 1. And force to 1 is for your kind of expensive parts. Seemed like at one point in time, you could stock, and I don't know whether you still can or not, you could stock complete engines for motorcycles and snowmobiles. And there were times back in the early days in the parts department that I worked in, we would stock a complete motor. And you don't want to have 20 complete motors in stock because they're expensive, and you don't sell a ton of them, but maybe you sell 2 or 3 of them a year. And that's a good example of something that when you sell it, I want the system to remind me to eventually reorder it. Other use cases might be TVs in the RV industry, satellite dishes, outboard motors in the marine space, maybe expensive electronics in the marine space. You want to keep 1 in stock, but you probably don't want more than 1. Force to 1's a good reorder point for those. Force to 0 are those things that you don't want the system to recommend you reorder it. Maybe there's a problem with the part, maybe it's discontinued, and the system keeps reminding you, reorder this thing. Well, I can't get it anymore. Stop telling me. So force to 0, set those. It's going to prevent those from being reminded to you over and over again. Now, Mark, Mr. Lucas and I were having a conversation around force to 0 the other day, and Mark brought up a good point. So we'll bring the first Amigo into the conversation again. And Mark was saying, there are times when I've set things to force to 0, but all of a sudden the popularity of the thing comes back. Let's say 2-strokes become the thing again, and 4-strokes and electric bikes go away, and everything's 2-stroke again. We need to start stocking those pistons, rings, circlips, and bearings. And everything that I've set to force to 0, I can then replenish, move it into something else, but the force to 0 still shows up on some reports, kind of teases me a little bit and says, don't forget about me. And then when it's time to remember them, you can turn them back on again. I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective. Not that he's a 2-stroke fan.
One thing that he also brought up, and I don't know if it makes sense to show the screen right now for this, but some of these settings for the min-max, force to 1, force to 0, while you're ordering them, there's a little cue inside the ordering window that on that part, it tells you this has this setting on it.
Yeah.
And so helpful to just watch for those in the ordering window.
Yeah, great point. Let's see if we can fire up an example of that. And to be honest, every time I talk to Mark, Brian, I learned something new, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think when he showed me this, I played smart, like, oh yeah, of course. I had never seen that before, even though I've stared at this screen 10,000 times. I've never noticed this. So I'm guessing folks on the call probably haven't seen this either. So I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah.
And before I get to where it's located on the screen, maybe somebody sees it. But if we go back to, I just switched this to force to 0, saying, I don't want this anymore. Don't tell me to order it. But I put it on my order screen so that we could see the trigger. And now that I've entered 1, 2, 3 on the ordering screen, notice over here below my quantities, there's a phrase, force quantity to 0. So it's giving me a little bit of an indication that that part that you're trying to reorder, you don't want that part. A little bit of a reminder. I kind of think that's an important reminder. It ought to be flashing and maybe turning green or yellow or something. But
and if you have the same suggestion Mark does, Mark also suggested it'd be nice to be able to just change it from there too. So we've already got that noted for us here, but keep in mind that there, as you put some stuff in, Lightspeed's done some good work in the background, and there's some extra things that pop up for us on the screen. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. I would have forgotten about it. Again, I learned that 2 days ago when we talked the other day, and I've stared at this screen for 15 years every day and didn't know. So anyway, learn something every day. And Mark is a great teacher, which is why he's the first amigo. All right, so force to 1, we talked about that. Force to 0, we talked about. Sales curve is probably one of the more complex elements, and I'm going to flash the slide back up on the screen. Sales curve, which when you're entering a part number into the system for the first time, you're adding something brand new, an item's pulling in from price books, you're checking a price on something that's never been in your system before, your default reorder point every time is going to be sales curve. Now, if you want to flip it to min-max force of any of those two, you can go into the inventory record and change it and then manually override some of those details. But by default, you're always going to have sales curve applied to the part. And sales curve takes a lot of aggregate information and helps to make a smarter suggestion on reordering. Now, I'm not suggesting that anybody that's using min-max is not smart. But what this is doing is it's looking at a bigger, broader picture to make suggestions on reorder points. It's looking back to, we talked about it earlier in our call today, the 12 months worth of history. So I'm on the history tab in an inventory item. This is visible on the order screen as well. This year and last year's calendar months, every month of the year of this and last year, if I can spit that out, quantity sold, but the number in particular that I'm keying in on is the last 12 months. It's looking at that number. It's also looking at your budget. And I might lean on you a little bit on this piece, Brian, but we talked about this on our call with Mr. Sheffield the other day, and this is a relevant subject for where we're heading next. I'm in system, and I'm going to a screen called Ordering Defaults. And as I'm looking at this screen, you'll notice that there's a sales curve reference, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. So back to sales curve. What is this thing doing in the middle of the system menu? It seems crazy. It is, but it's there. And every month of the year is presented here with $1 attached to it. And what these numbers are is these represent how much money it cost us to stock the shelves. Generally, somebody in the accounting office is going to manually enter these, usually at end of year or first of next, as they've observed how much we spent to stock shelves in our parts department or what our costs for parts are for last year. For each month of the year, they're going to enter those values in there. And what this is going to do is it's going to help to contribute to the buying guide. It's going to help to contribute to suggestions on reorder points. And I'll get to how and why in just a moment. But the piece that I might lean on you a little bit, Mr. Lucas, is this one. Inventory method, current cost versus weighted average.
Sure.
And back in my support days, I remember dealers would call and they would say, hey, can you tell me if I'm on weighted average or current cost? And we'd go to this screen. And the dealer would say things like, well, let's switch it to weighted average. And I would say, okay, yeah, just go ahead and select that and save. Well, back then I was young and was transitioning from the horse and buggy to the car. So I was still figuring things out. And I didn't know any better. I didn't know what the implications of doing that would be. And I might ask you to speak a little bit about that, Brian, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, I'll take a couple minutes here. And I also have dealers ask me, is LIFO or FIFO options as far as inventory methods, and as of right now, no. Lightspeed has current cost, which is essentially the last time you bought it. That is the cost that is on that part. And if you had parts in the past that you had ordered and they're still in stock, those get revalued to whatever the most recent purchase of that part is. So you might have, 50 parts that you ordered, 2 years ago, but you reordered one because of a warranty, and the price that was on that part 2 years ago on those 50 that are still on your shelf, or the cost, sorry, not the price, the cost is now updated to that new one because you have now ordered another one. Current cost is not GAAP. A lot of dealers on this call may not need to actually adhere to GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting principles. Um, and I would say the majority of dealers are likely on current cost. And the reasoning I think behind that, just in my experience, is because it is the easiest for the parts person to understand. Because if they look at the part and the value on, the cost is different from what Pricebooks has, they just change it, right? Like they want to make it's easy for them to know, I guess, how to adjust what the value of that part is to know if it's right or wrong. And I guess when I say right or wrong to them means it should match what the current setting is, right? From an accounting standpoint, there are different ways that you can attribute cost of goods sold based on the inventory method. So weighted average, um, it is a gap approved method. There's some extra features that come into play with Lightspeed on weighted average, where it's trying to limit or to smooth out the fluctuation on the cost related to those parts. So those 50 that you had in stock from 2 years ago, and then the one you just reordered, it's going to hold those parts at a more over the time based on the quantity of the parts, a more weighted value, so you're not having as significant of changes up and down. So weighted average is a method that is used typically by dealers that can understand that concept. And what I would say is moving from current cost to weighted average for us, that's an easy move, kind of to what you said, Brian Tierney. You can move that, and there's not an immediate accounting impact change that happens when you do that. It's only in the reverse direction. If you're on weighted average and you move to current cost, because essentially weighted average, it doesn't connect to the price books and makes those, make those changes to the parts. It's waiting for an event to happen when that part shows up, when it makes changes. And so if you move it from weighted average to current cost, if you run price books after that, all of those parts are going to change, and there's probably dramatic impact to the financials from that. And just from an accounting perspective, usually when you choose a method, you should likely remain on that method for the foreseeable future. And I would say about 5 years is typically the range where they're the IRS or different auditors would make sure you're not trying just to make a change just to benefit you from a tax standpoint, and not how do we operate as a business and how do I understand this business. So current cost weighted average is an easier switch. There is a lot more learning that needs to happen so that you actually use it the right way. We like weighted average, but going from weighted average to current cost, there's definitely more to consider there.
Appreciate all that input. All very strong things to consider, things that I didn't consider back in the days when I said, just change it, save it, have a good day. A lot more nuance there. So perfect. Appreciate you putting that, offering those thoughts. So let's take another look at a couple of other things that are going to impact sales curve. And one of those things is we mentioned the history, we mentioned this budget, we mentioned on-hand values earlier. So on-hand and available, those are two numbers that are going to impact sales curve, reorder points and suggestions, and the algorithm is going to make a suggestion on what you should reorder. I'm going to use the term that's not on this screen. The term is insight. And insight is looking at a number of things, and it kind of just takes one word and a variety of values and combines it into one word, and it basically says either yes or no. And what that yes or no is saying that you've got some available to sell right now. You've got some that when they arrive, because they're already on order, as soon as they get here, they'll be available to sell. So that on order available and the on hand available are two counts that we take combined, make an insight count. And also back to the invoice screen. For those of you that are doing this, bravo. For those of us, I was a parts guy, as I mentioned, for a lot of years, and I think I saw this on, well, I know I saw this on the screen 1,000 times, but never used it. And as we go into the invoice screen, we know what the SLD column is. That's I'm selling a part now to a consumer. SO is special order. Layaway, I often refer to Kmart whenever I talk about layaway. It's funny that we still use that term, and I don't know, unless there's somebody on the call that can say that, yeah, we still do layaways. Most dealers have kind of gone away from the idea of layaway. And the example that I often give when I'm talking to dealers is, remember when your mom used to take you to Kmart in the 80s to buy your school clothes, and she'd put your jeans and your shirts on layaway, and she'd make payments on them over the course of a couple months. And once the clothing's paid off, she can then pick up her layaway and take them home, and now you can go to school, son. Those days are over. Now that everybody uses credit cards, you can just put it on your credit card and take it with you now. So the concept of layaway has changed over the years, and we now use it more for hold, where customer calls and says, hey, I'm looking for that Dunlop. Do you have one? Yeah, I got one. It's my last one. Okay, I'll be there Saturday. Can you hold it for me? I can put it on layaway, and I can collect $50 so I can get some buy-in from the customer and cashier that transaction. But that's kind of what we use layaway for, in case you were wondering, why the heck does Lightspeed still use layaway? It's hold. Or LST. This is where I'm going with this. So I go on these rambles. I apologize. Hence why I have the PowerPoint. So it kind of keeps me in line. I don't go off too much.
I'm excited for this one because I don't think many people know what LST is. So
LST, yeah.
Glad we're getting there.
I remember seeing this as a parts guy, just ignoring it. LST is short for lost sale. So those of you that didn't know that, you learned something. There's one takeaway from today, and it's lost sale. And what does that mean? Well, let's use this as an example. A customer comes in, you have a spark plug in stock? No, man, I don't have that plug in stock. Oh, okay. Well, I can get it for you. Well, I know you can, but I got to have it now. I'm going to go next door and see if they got it at Bob's Power Sports. All right. So me as a attending, I don't know what the word is, a good parts guy, I'm going to create a lost sale. And I can put a customer on the ticket. I don't have to, but I'm going to cashier this invoice. Now, most of the time, we set the lost invoices not to print. So I'm not getting a bunch of paper printing for those lost sales. I don't want that to print. So I just want it to contribute to today's dailies, but it's also going to contribute to our lost sales list and say, if you had this part in stock, you could have sold it. And the system starts to notice a pattern. Gosh, it looks like Lightspeed in the background is thinking this. Gosh, if we had this spark plug, we could have sold 10 of them this month. It's funny how they sound similar to me in the background of Lightspeed, but nonetheless, it'll make these kinds of suggestions. And then when you go into the buying guide, which is where we're going, this is the punchline, takes everything we talked about from the budget to insight counts, which is your on hand and available, your on order available, and your lost sales. And now everything compiles into this. So that was a long segue into where we're going here, folks. And by the way, Mark is going to expand much further on this than I did, but let's go into the ordering screen. I call this my parts wish list. It's a list of everything I need to order today or at some point in the future. That's what's on the screen now. But if I say Lightspeed, tell me what else I need to order. And I want to make sure that I've got enough parts in stock for the next 30 days or the next month. Now, the graphic image that pulled up on the screen shows a series of columns. And each one of these columns refers back to that dollar value that we saw on the other screen where we talked about weighted average and current cost. Those are where those dollar values are showing up as an illustration to the viewer of this screen. And I selected 1 month, which is the green section of these blue bars that says for the next green section there, I want to make sure I have enough parts in stock for my customers. Then I can pick and choose what supplier do I want to order from, my helmet supplier, my tire supplier. Do I just want everybody? So I pick everybody. Or I can pinpoint categories like my t-shirts. I'm just going to do my t-shirt order today, or my chemicals order for the day. But no, we're going to do everything. And I click Run Guide. And Lightspeed thinks for just a moment. It looks through all of that algorithmic data that we spoke about. It looks at my min-maxes, looks at my force to ones, looks at my force to zeros, and it gives me a suggested order. And this suggested order I can use to then drop into my order screen if I'm ready to place my orders, or I can use this as a guide and I can make adjustments to it. Sadly, from this screen, I can't click in and drill into the detail and make adjustments here, though I'm told we will see that sometime. But I can use these as references and go back and make adjustments to the reorder points. But ultimately, if I like what I see here, I click Update. And everything that was suggested to me by Lightspeed now drops onto my order screen, and I can send it off to the vendor.
I think that's a good spot to just let everybody know the first Amigo has arrived back from solving crime and what he was really doing. There's another webinar, I believe, Mark, right? You're on
sorry.
at PDA?
Sorry about that, but I am back. So I double booked 2 webinars at the same time. And as much as I tried to use my best Harry Potter skills, I was not able to be in 2 places at once like Hermione.
No worries. We've definitely had a lot of interest related to the buying guide, a lot of questions related to that. So definitely think that might move that webinar up on our priority list. And just for everybody listening, you know, we might need to take a look at that other webinar. Mark's always got some good stuff going on. So
Yeah,
welcome in.
Yeah, I think based on our pre-meeting earlier this week, that the next meeting we're going to do is going to be a deep dive into the buying guide and kind of best practices there. So an area that I got 30 years of experience. So I think that's what we're talking about fitting in next.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
And having Mark come in made it a really easy way to break and say, Brian, you got another 30 minutes left almost. Just
Okay.
as a reference to where you're at. So
Got it. Yeah, time flies. But yeah, good to have you, Mark. I didn't steal too much of your thunder on the buying guide. I was hinting all along that, and sadly, I'm giving you some homework to do. We'll be revisiting the buying guide in detail very soon.
I'm good with that.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about one other thing now. I forgot an element when we were talking about some of the parts fundamentals. We did talk about supersessions and similar parts and primary keys and all of the different facets of the inventory. We showed some use cases of locator, etc. But one of the things I neglected to talk about, and as I'm looking at my other screen and I saw a note and a reminder that I told myself, don't forget about this thing, and of course I forgot. So I want to talk about this for just a quick second. For those of you that are familiar with serialized parts, you might know about this and you might have explored this, but for those of you that haven't, we might give you another takeaway for today's webinar, for something that maybe you can add to your parts department and an additional resource or additional tool to be effective in the parts department. So let's pull up a parts invoice. And where I'm going with this is a serialized part. Now, a part number, so far that we've identified them as having a primary key. That's your part number, your description, your cost of retail. And as we look at this screen, we're seeing that very same example here. But what makes a serialized part different and unique is, from this visual, one element that'll kind of key into the fact that this part's a little bit different than the fan belt. Well, I've got a part number, just like any other part, any spark plug, oil filter, taillight lens, very much the same. My descriptions are going to be unique to the part, kind of describing or telling me what I'm about to sell. But notice this column here that's listed as a serialized part, and there's a dot. As soon as I enter a serialized part on an invoice screen, I'm going to get that dot. And I might also see some other notes references, and I really put these in here to make this thing look extra sexy. But what we see on the movement code is this unit's going to come with a 12-month warranty. It includes the wire harness and maybe an owner's manual, so I can see those details. And, you know, I know some trailer stores that actually sell their trailers this way. I know some marine stores that sell outboard motors this way. I know other dealerships that sell lithium batteries and electric bicycles and maybe even small motorcycles this way. So use cases, this is an edge trimmer. It's a handheld piece of power equipment. Has a retail price. But what's unique about this part is when I sell it, I can register it for warranty. I want to track the individual serial number for the part that I'm selling. It is a part, but it's technically almost a major unit in some ways. So here's what that looks like. When I add a customer to this sale, what's going on here? There we go. And I bet you can ask, guess who I'm adding, right? Our fearless hero, Jeff Emig, is going to buy not only a fan belt from me today, but also an edge trimmer. So Jeff says, yeah, I'll take that one. And so I said, oh, okay, I'll go grab it off the showroom floor. Maybe it's still in the box. Maybe it isn't. But as I'm going to cashier the invoice, Lightspeed says, hey, hold on a minute. Which one of those edge trimmers are you selling? So I look at the box, I look at the unit, I see the serial number. Oh, it's the one ending in 711. That's the one I need. So I check that box, click OK. And then I cashier it just like I would any other traditional sale. And I hit the cashier button. I recommend, when it comes to a serialized part, by the way, I like an 8x11 receipt versus the grocery store receipts, just because I think it's a little more professional looking, a little more polished, and it's going to give you the extra detail. I'll show you what I mean. So if I go into parts and I'm going to reprint that invoice and just show you what Mr. Jeff Emig, our fearless hero, just got as I handed it to him, and he walks out the door smiling with his new piece of power equipment. When I reprint this invoice on the screen, this is what printed out of my laser printer for Jeff. And it'll have my business logo, Jeff's information, part numbers, descriptions, retail prices, method of payment, what was the total tax, but there's the serial number that I sold him. And now I can go warranty register that part. I might be tracking that for a number of reasons, because serialized parts all have similar part numbers. When we're talking edge trimmers, TVs, electric bicycles, it might have one part number, but every serial number is different, and every one of those units is different. And the serial number gives you the ability to identify those unique sales. Okay.
I like that template with the OEM logos on the back.
Pretty cool, huh? It looks official. Yeah, makes it look almost like a buyer's order, almost.
Can I add two pieces of insight related to serial parts, or just two
Please.
questions to think about?
Yeah.
One thing, because I've heard a lot of dealers, when they learn about that, they're like, oh, that's so much faster to sell a unit. I'm going to jump in and do that. Make sure that sales tax is being collected properly, because between parts and units, there might be differences there. And so the system isn't necessarily designed to sell everything through as a part, which now you can, right? If you just heard this, you could do that. And then the second piece is you, by naturally moving to that, you might also forget about the whole F&I concept, right? Of all of that second stage of the business, of the sale. And so, it's serialized part, I think is definitely very valuable, and there's a lot of good use cases for it, but don't allow that to cause you a tax audit problem, as well as, just divert your people away from that F&I department. Make sure they're still going through that process.
Yeah. Good points.
I would also say too, that in parts and accessories, we're kind of used to long-term looking at the margins for parts and accessories. Once you start selling serialized parts, a lot of times what we find is that the margins on those are considerably lower. And so you'll see a dealer where their volume starts to increase, but their margin is coming down. So good to make sure that if we're going to have serialized parts, that we've assigned them specific sales categories so that we can extract that data out. And so we know what is our true P&A margin, what is our margin on serialized parts. We need to be able to look at those a little bit differently.
Yeah, all good points. I told him on the call earlier, Mark, that I learned something every day, right, with Lightspeed. And remember the other day when you were showing how when you add a part that has a force to 0 or force to 1 reorder point, how it shows up on the order screen in that little tiny box. I'd never seen that before in years and years, and I suspect that some of the folks on the call hadn't seen that before. So I was kind of expounding on your knowledge and wisdom. So we talked about that a little bit today.
I've just spent too much time in the system.
Well, you catch on the little nuances, because I've spent a lot of time too, and I didn't see that. So, I'm always distracted by YouTube and Jeff Emig. So maybe that's my problem.
That's all right. We're all here to help each other.
That's right. All right. So I want to talk about a little bit of an expansion on this thought. I won't beat this too much, this dead horse too much, but I will just also offer some other insights into serialized parts, and it's the receiving piece. Because a lot of times when I introduce serialized parts to folks, they'll say, well, how do I receive those items? And there's a couple ways that folks do it. Well, through creating the purchase order, just like you would any other spark plug, oil filter item in your parts department, you're going to create those purchase orders on the order screen. You're going to update the purchase order. It sends those items to your receiving screen, just like you're used to. But what will happen when you go to receive a serialized part, these are examples of, that's the actual edge trimmer we sold Mr. Emig. I've ordered one more of those. And when I go to receive it, Lightspeed's going to ask me, what is the serial number for that item that I'm receiving? So when I go to click the save button, or when I go to update the inventory, it says, wait a minute, what's the serial number that you're adding? And that's of course, at that point, when you add the serial number that's relevant to that item. So there's an additional step that takes place when you're receiving serialized parts. Just consider that when you're moving down that road. There's one additional step that you want to be aware of. Not very complicated. It seems pretty relevant to this conversation, but just thought I would add that as additional thought. All right. With that, we talked about the buying guide. We talked about reorder points. We talked about some other elements in the parts department. But one thing that I get from customers, dealers that they call me sometimes. I run into dealership trade shows. Back in my support days, I would often get questions about special orders. And special orders specifically, in these scenarios, a dealer might come to me and say, I've got 300 special orders that are sitting open, that these parts are all gone. Can you just go in the background and wipe them out for me? The answer is no. There's a lot attached to a special order pickup. So I wanted to spend a minute and talk about those. I think it's the buying guide. We're going to expand on that in a future webinar. And we talked a little bit about that already today. But I do want to give some folks some things to consider when it comes to special orders. And I'm going to go back into the Lightspeed screen and just speak about that for just a moment. So I'm going to pull up a parts invoice. And everybody that's worked in parts, created a part sale, created a special order, probably has seen these steps before. But for some reason or another, it's very common, and I'm not saying anybody's wrong for doing this. I think there's multiple steps that are part of the special order process, and the last step is often overlooked by dealers. And it's a very critical step that can put you into a very precarious situation if you neglect them, okay? I'm just going to show you an example. And we're going to order a part together. We're going to just go through the rigmarole for a moment and make sure everybody's on the same page with me. So this time we're going to order for Jeremy McGrath. And we're going to cashier this invoice. And we're special ordering an item for him. He pays cash. We hand him a receipt. He walks out the door. That item lands on the ordering screen. It's got Jeremy's name attached to it. We create the purchase order, order the part. It comes in. Jeremy gets a text message saying your part's here. He comes in and picks up the part. So Jeremy walks in the door and he says, hey, I'm here for my part. Me as the parts guy go and grab it off the shelf, and I hand it to Jeremy, and I'm so starstruck that I forget to pick up the item in the invoice screen. So I want to urge everybody to make sure that you're doing that. And if you audit your list of special orders, a good practice would be print off a list, and I'll show you where you can find this, a report that shows all parts received. Maybe go back to your shelves, and if you're looking at your received list, check to see if those parts are still there. If they're gone, come back to the invoice screen, hit the special order button, find the special order that appears to be picked up, and pick it up. Does this sound familiar, Mark or Mr. Lucas? Do you hear problems with this too, like I'm hearing? Or am I way off base?
Can you state the question again real quick? I was answering the question. I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So the question would be, I used to get this in support almost every single day. A dealer would call and say, hey, we're doing an inventory. We're doing this. We're doing that. And I've got 500 special orders that are all picked up. They show that they're not picked up in Lightspeed. Can you just go in the background and mark them picked up? I get that question a lot. I don't get it as much anymore because I'm not in support, but I got it a lot in the past. Still get it every now and then. So what I see dealers forgetting to do, and it's probably not every time, people get distracted, the phone's ringing, there's a crying baby over there. You forget to pick up the special order in Lightspeed. You've handed it to the customer, they're gone with it. So it's a good practice to go through your list of special orders, and anything that's gone, pick it up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
okay.
So we have the system we developed at Woods is that every Tuesday morning, our parts manager has a scheduled report for special orders and for layaways. And that is sorted by salesperson with a page break after each salesperson. He prints that out every Tuesday morning and hands it out to each of the individual parts people. And then throughout the rest of the week, every morning, she sits down with one or two of her employees for 30 minutes and they go through a list of items. And one of the things that they have to take her through is here's all the outstanding orders that I generated that have not been picked up yet. And so then at that point in time, if there was something that slipped out without being picked up, then it's taken care of at that point in time. But it's just kind of getting into the practice of doing that audit is really powerful. And that way too, we're looking at layaways. So layaways don't sit in the system for too long.
And why I would probably add to that is until you hit that pickup button, that's the key where Lightspeed ties the accounting in, right? So that
Exactly.
It's just on hold. It's in this open list, but once you actually hit pickup, it removes it from inventory and it records the journal entry for the revenue and the cost of goods sold, sales tax. So if you have 100 of those that you forgot to mark pick up, your income statement doesn't have it. If you're going to a 20 group meeting, you don't see it. Your sales tax, it has been underreported. So it is a very significant list to watch. And in fact, just kind of added for the other departments, open repair orders, another big thing. If they're getting old and they should have been marked, they should have been marked cashiered, but they didn't. Same thing with your sales deals. You can totally account for cash. So for all, if any accountants or controllers watching this, you can reconcile the bank account, but your P&L has a lot of missed data, and we have a lot of dealers that are missing millions of dollars in sales on their P&L, and they don't know why. They're like, it's in my system, I've got it with customer name, and they've paid for it and everything, yet, but you never hit finalize or pickup or cashier. So those three buttons mean a lot in the system.
Well, I also find that in a lot of cases too, I'm amazed at how many dealers don't know that the desktop tool exists, or that they haven't set it up. And I don't know if you wanted to show them that real quick, Tierney, but the desktop tool actually has a nice widget on there that shows all the parts and accessories that have been received. And if me and my dealership, I would, as an owner or a GM, want to, in my monthly sit down with my parts manager, I'd want to go through every special order that's more than 90 days old that's been received and not picked up, and find out exactly what's going on with it. But yeah, you've got that right on your desktop, and you can give that to your parts counter employees so that they can actually see, what did I order that needs to be picked up? And if you've got parts employees that are on commission, which we would hope that the majority of counter people are, if you've got employees who are getting paid commission, until they pick up that special order, they're not getting paid on it.
Good point. Yeah, appreciate you bringing up the desktop. The desktop is a powerful element that you can really add not only to your parts experience in Lightspeed, but other facets of the business like service, accounting even, and sales. But to Mark's point, there is a widget. So desktop, for those of you that don't know, is in system. Go to desktop. You'll press your designer button, and you can pick and choose what elements, what widget, what color-coded box do you want to monitor throughout the day. And then when you log into Lightspeed, this is what's served up to you first, front and center. So you get to review all of those open special orders, and whether you're running a report or you're just simply looking at this list, it's a good reminder to go through those special orders and pick them up. Yeah, great point. Awesome. So I know we're getting close to the top of our time, and there's one or two more things that I really wanted to showcase on the call today, and they're both kind of related to each other: margin versus markup and pricing strategies. And they're kind of one and the same in this context. Understanding the difference between markup and margin, and I put a little bit of a slide together that illustrates the difference. And we're going to show some use cases in the Escalator tool in Lightspeed where you can see the way one works over the other one, and how one might be mapped versus the other. And a lot of times there's some confusion about markup versus margin. Some folks will say, well, if I increase the item by the 50% markup, doesn't that give me a 50% margin? No, actually it doesn't. It gives you something closer to 33%. And so understanding that margin and markup are two different things, and applying that to escalators, you can make sure and ensure that you're making the proper margin on your part sales. With that, dynamic pricing strategies, I sometimes think of this as a pricing matrix. Dealers will come to me and say, hey, I want to try to apply a matrix to my parts department. And first thing I think of is Keanu Reeves in 1999. But pricing matrix in this context is referring to price escalators in Lightspeed. And we're going to show you two different examples, one that is taking the concept of markup and applying it to parts, and one that's taking the concept of margin. And really show two critical elements that allows you to determine which direction do I want to go. Do I want to mark my stuff based on a markup, or do I want to use a margin? And I think probably both are relevant, but I think dealerships are probably more focused on margins than they are markup. So let's take a peek. We're going to go to parts. We're going to go to lists. We're going to go to part escalators, and I want to show you two different iterations of a pricing Keanu Reeves matrix. So if I open up one of these, this is a sample of a retail matrix. And specifically, there's a couple of elements that we want to talk about on the screen. When I've applied an escalator to a supplier, or maybe I've applied it to other places in the system, we'll show where those applications can be set. I may decide that if I'm applying this escalator to a supplier, to a category, that everything that lives in that supplier, that category, will have a minimum selling price. If it's a fuse, if it's a washer, if it's a nut and bolt, nothing will sell for less than the minimum retail item, $199 in this case. Also, we've got an ability to set a rounding calculator into an escalator. And that's going to be true whether we're talking markup or margin. But what you'll find as you're looking at price books is sometimes you get prices that come through your price book catalog that are ending in a .29, so like 29 and 29 cents and 12 and 39 cents. And there is some value to rounding that 39 or 29 cents from that to 99 cents. In fact, even at a very minimal level, if we said we're moving everything from 95 to 99 cents, recently did a little bit of a study for middle-sized dealerships. They're seeing an increase in revenue just simply by making an extra $4 on a parts sale to the tune of about $140 to $200 per month in additional revenue. That's a small number, but it adds up over the course of a year. And of course, if you're looking at price book numbers, most of the time the retail price on a price book price is not 95 cents or 99 cents. It might be some weird .11 cents. So if we round everything up to 99, there's a lot of found money. Now, this example is looking at cost ranges from $0 cost through $50, $50 through $100, $100 through $1,000, and $1,000 through as much as probably we'd ever spend on a part. And it's going to increase suggested retail by a percentage. And this is an example of a markup. We're marking up our suggested retail, which is our price book retail, by 125%, 115%, 110%, or 100%. In other words, do I want it to be a little bit above retail? In some cases, maybe I want it to be a little bit below retail if I've got a competitive market or if I want to be competitive with an online retailer. We can use this tool and apply it to suppliers and categories to really customize our pricing in the system. And one of the things that we talked about, and I haven't experimented with this, but I'm going to take Mark's word for it. I think it's probably true. There's a little bit of an issue with the retail increase versus suggested. My experience would suggest that you want it to be on suggested. That's looking at price book retail pricing and it's updating one time. We've heard, Mark, that sometimes if we apply an escalator that's based on retail and we run it multiple times, it increases that retail incrementally. And
yeah, that stacks those increases every time you run the update. Yeah. So we really want to stick with suggested.
Yeah. Now, if I look at an alternative to this, a margin matrix, this is taking a cost figure. So margin is basing its value on cost. And again, the escalator range is taking a $0 cost item through 50, 50 through 100, 100 through 1,000, 1,000 to as much as I might spend on a part. So I've got a matrix of escalations within this example. Minimum price, $1.99. My rounding tool set to anything that ends in 0 through 98 cents. I want it to be rounded up to 99 cents. And then I'm increasing the cost, or I'm escalating the cost by these percentage numbers. And that's going to give me a margin that refers to, let's pull this little slide up here, closer to 55%, 45%, 40%, and 35% margin based on those numbers on the escalator. Two different ways to apply them. Now, one thing to be aware of, if you want that to automatically update in the middle of the night when your price books update, some of you may know this, but if you go into a supplier, you can ask Lightspeed to automatically update your escalators as the price books hit the system. And you can say enable escalation and select the template or the matrix that you'd like to apply to that, either category or supplier. And then in the middle of the night when price books update, it's going to update your pricing. Now, some dealerships will also want the system to print labels in case prices change. And that's a very labor-intensive process. If prices are changing frequently, to have to re-sticker all your parts. So things to consider. And I think, Mark, you had some thoughts around that too the other day around price updates and should be relabeling things. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I think that, a couple of things you already went through earlier today, kind of weighted average versus last cost, correct?
Yes.
So if you're a dealer that's utilizing weighted average and you run the price escalators, nothing happens to the cost of the items that you have today. So if a Dunlop tire costs $200 from WPS and you get a $40 discount on it and you pay $160 and you've received one for that, when you run the escalator with weighted average, nothing happens to that. If you are set up on last cost and you do not have that part set as no update, when you run the escalator, your $60 is out the window. It's a journal entry that goes back, depending on how you've got the system set up, as a gain in the parts department that didn't happen as a transaction over the counter. One of the issues that we've had, and the system has a workaround for this, is that if, let's say for Parts Unlimited, you go to run the price escalator and there has been, some price updates that have come out for all of the items that you've got sitting out there on the showroom floor, if your parts are not set up to not update, and let's say that the retail went from 110 to 120. Now, all of a sudden, you potentially got a lot of items on your showroom floor that have price tags that are out of date on them. Now, will the system create those new price tags for you for everything that had a change, and then you can go out and reprice all those items? Yeah, but what a lot of dealers find is that works great for the jackets and gloves that you've got. But when somebody didn't click the little button for no labels on the box of 500 valve stems that you got that came in, and the valve stems went up 2 cents. Now you got 500 labels or 480 labels for all those valve stems as well. We tend to burn through a whole lot of them. So it's, one of the things that we do, be it right or be it wrong, is that on the ordering screen, as we're placing the orders, we look at what's the cost and what's the retail and what is our margin. And we're making those adjustments as we go and as we place orders instead of using the price escalator to do that for us.
Good point.
Brian, with just a couple questions, maybe it's also helpful to show them you can turn the setting on or off on a part, and also just to only update retail versus cost on an individual part. And while you're pulling that up, Mark, there's a question in here that I would like to see if you could give us some feedback on. It says, when using parts escalation as an OEM dealership, would you worry about losing customers due to pricing higher than competitors, or being more expensive than what the customer can order the part just directly through the OEM website? I worry that I would lose customers once they realize I am higher priced.
Actually, I work with a large dealer group in center of the country in a very competitive marketplace. So they've got 3 locations in power sports and marine. And they, up until about 4 months ago, didn't have any escalators set up. And it was one of those areas where I essentially told the dealership that they could pay my consulting costs just by that escalator. And then they would get double the amount that I was charging them if we utilized that. And so we put in an escalator that, on the bottom end on items that cost less than $2, it might be adding, another 20 or 30 cents to those. And on the high end for items that retailed for, more than 300 or 400 bucks, it's just adding $4 or $5 to the retail price of those. What we have tended to find over my time as a 20 group facilitator, that if you're a dealership that has a good selection of products, if you're the dealer that has the inventory when customers need it, price is very rarely ever the objection. So if somebody's Ranger or Defender is not working and you've got a drive shaft in stock, you're going to win that competition, even if you're 10 or 20 bucks higher than everybody else, because you've got the part. If you're the dealer that never really has any product in stock, then I think the escalator is an item that's really going to hurt you. Because now, if your answer to every question that comes in from a customer is, yeah, I can get that just like you can get it, why is the customer going to get it from you when they can get it from somebody else cheaper? But people still want instant gratification. And so I think you really have to look at that. And there is a mechanism that we came up to measure fill rate in the dealerships. There's not a direct report in Lightspeed, but we built a custom report that looks at, what each individual SKU, and primarily we look at this as far as fulfilling for the service department, but we look at for every SKU that we go to sell, did we have it in stock or did we have to order it? And then we can calculate our fill rate off of that. And what we're really looking for is if we've got a dealership who's got a fill rate of better than about 80%, which sounds low, but it's pretty hard to get to that because the industry average is closer to 62 to 63%. But if we've got a dealership that's got a fill rate to service of about 80%, that's a dealership that is either way overstocked or they've got a really good parts manager who's doing a good job of stocking items. And at that level, you can start to work on that escalator and you're not going to see any loss in volume. All you're going to see is a gain in margin.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Mark. Just essentially the 2 takeaways I took from that is, if we have it in stock, it probably doesn't come up as much as long as we're also providing a good experience, right? And I think about that all the time. I will drive another 20 minutes, 30 minutes to get to someone who I know is going to take care of me. And I probably am willing to spend a little bit more too. I don't even think about the price of certain things because I know that they're going to take care of me. And so if you're providing that type of experience and you have it in stock, they might not even look at the price, is what I'm hearing. So.
Yeah, if you got friendly parts counter people and you've got, we talk about it all the time, the difference between power sports and auto is that automotive is transactional and power sports is relational. if you've got a great team of people who work for you, who, you know, are enthusiasts about the product that we've got, and the customer comes in and they get a smile and they enjoy being there and they get to look around the showroom and see everything else. I mean, to me, I would rather do that than just go on Amazon and buy that air filter that I need. I want to go check out the cool stuff. And if I get treated great in the process and they got fresh coffee and I get to see the cool new Jeff Emig special that just came out, all day long, every weekend. I love, you know, it's, my wife hates it when we travel and we go all around the world. Where do we end up? In motorcycle dealerships, because I want to see what they're like.
Yep. Yeah, I've probably told this story to everybody on this call before at one time or another, but I've got a motorcycle store, one of the biggest in the country, by the way, Young Power Sports XL, gigantic store, 5 miles away from me, and they have a coffee shop in the middle of their dealership. So that is an incentive for my wife to go there, because she gets her great cup of coffee and I get to go smell all the new dirt bikes and taste and touch everything on the showroom floor. So we turned it into a weekend event. We go there every Saturday, and, you know, they've gotten to know us. I feel good about sometimes probably overspending on a t-shirt that I shouldn't be, but I am, because I feel inclined to spend money with them because of the way they treat me. So yeah, all those things are relevant.
Perfect.
I know we're getting right to the top. I think we're just a little over time. Am I right on that, Mr. Lucas?
We are a little bit over time. And so if we want to try to wrap up maybe in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah. So
and back to that screen, I kind of took us off topic there, but just to show them the little buttons related to the pricing updates.
Sure. Yeah. If you wanted to, and the reason why you might turn off an Escalator is you got a special price on helmets. And so you bought them at a low price. You're going to put them on the showroom floor and knock them down. You might set those prices to not update and those costs not to update, so you don't lose out on your relevant sale pricing based on price book updates. So every single part number has an update pricing function that you can turn on, turn off, decide, do I want retail impacted, cost only, or do I want everything impacted? I have control over those things. And by the way, there is a mass update tool, and we probably ought to put that maybe on a future call. We started talking about mass updating. I was going to showcase some of that today, but we're just running out of time. There's a lot to talk about in parts inventory updating tools. But the next subject that I was going to talk about, and considering where we are in terms of time and lack thereof, inventory counts. And Lightspeed did a webinar on this almost a year ago that's available on YouTube. I'm going to show you the reference to it if you're interested in taking a look at it. Earlier in the call, we talked about barcode scanners and the cost of them, what works, what doesn't work. Well, I mentioned to you that the mobile application is available for free. Right now, it's going under a little bit of a renovation. Over the next 30 days, we're kind of revising the skin of the mobile app. It's effectively the functions aren't changing, but the visual is going to change. This will be released to the consumer later on this year, but we're beta testing a couple things in an iOS space right now. We're going to be offering an Android version soon, but right now it's available to everybody at no cost. Download the mobile app. If you need some help with it, reach out to your admin at your dealership or reach out to customer support. We'll get it working for you. It's completely free. It gives you access to the program. It does not use a user license, by the way, but you can press the scan inventory button on your mobile app, walk around and scan all the barcodes on the parts in your inventory, walk back over to a Lightspeed computer and download all that inventory count into the screen and update your inventory without the need to buy costly barcode scanners. And the fact that the mobile app is free, it might save you, back to pricing. I was looking on Amazon this morning, $65 seems to be the entry-level rate. We used to sell a Motorola version here at Lightspeed to our dealerships that was $1,700, and that one came, I think, with a foot warmer and a massage chair. But that one you can't get anymore. So use the mobile app, try it out, see what you think. And if you're interested in seeing that webinar on inventory counts, if you go to YouTube, go to the Lightspeed channel, Lightspeed DMS, and you can find Mastering Inventory Management with Lightspeed. And it's 37 minutes long, and it goes into detail about physical inventory counts, recommendations, intervals, and all of those things. So it's a great reference for that. With that, I think we're at the time where we're probably going to part ways. But thank you, Mr. Lucas, for having me. Thank you for being here, Mark. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, sorry I was late. So I was trying to bang through as many questions on here that I thought I had answers to as possible, but I only had so much time to type. I did mention those reports that we utilize to review our special orders and layaways. Awesome. And if anybody wants those, you can just reach out to me and I'll email you those Lightspeed templates and you can just import them into your system. But they're formatted really nice, look good, broken up by salesperson. And If you can get your parts manager to start using those every week, you'll find that your special order and layaway problems will go away.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do believe you were able to answer the questions that were available during the chat. There's a couple out there that we definitely have some follow-ups related to the buying guide that I'll get over to you, Mark, as you know, you're planning that webinar. And there's some good helpful suggestions that were notated by a few dealers here as far as things that would make some things easier. And we'll get that over to the Lightspeed dev team as well to, you know, put that into the queue, hopefully. But Brian, thank you so much for your time, for the time you spent building this, working through it. There's a lot of very helpful, insightful information. Definitely has opened up my eyes more to the information available inside of Lightspeed. Just some of those simple little things, you know, it always comes back to, you know, I didn't even know there's that green button on the screen, and what does it do? And now that you click on it, oh, look at all these other buttons that I didn't know were there. And if any of you on this webinar, if there was any options you didn't see, just a helpful reminder that system security is a thing. You may have to get access to it. Recently, there has been what I think is an extremely huge and beneficial update to the security, doing it by roles, so that you can quickly update everybody by role versus having to do it individually. So take some time to look at that if you haven't had a chance to. But again, Brian, thank you for putting this to you know, this slide deck together for us, walking through this. And Mark, always appreciate your insight and your feedback, and glad we could get you for the last you know, about 40 minutes or so. Very helpful, insightful information. So
very much.
Hey, could I show one just quick thing that I learned the other day? That can you pull up the Lightspeed parts inventory screen real quick, Dirty?
I just stopped sharing. Let me. I think I did anyway. I stopped sharing, right?
You did. Yep.
Okay, my bad. Let's get this back up here.
I thought this was really interesting. It took me a couple of minutes to figure it out, and then as soon as I did it made a lot of sense. And I think this kind of plays into other areas.
Yeah, please.
If you go to parts inventory, just your parts inventory view.
Okay.
You know, when you get to the screen, put in a partial number like 1, 2. You know, if you look in the upper right hand corner, the system tells you that it only finds 2,500 parts. And so that's just kind of a limitation in the system, so that it's not overloading things. Yeah. And, you know, I had a dealer that was wondering why, when he sorted this by on hand, that he wasn't seeing all the parts that he knew that he had were on hand. And that's because when you're looking at this screen and you sort by the on-hand quantity, it's only sorting those 2,500 parts that are in that first list. It's not sorting the 2,500 parts that you have on hand. And it was a quick fix. All he had to do was go and click on that radio button for on-hand parts. Up there in the upper right-hand corner.
Yep.
And so now you'll see that you're getting less than 2,500 parts. And so that is showing all of their parts by brand. And, you know, it was kind of a question I'd never gotten before. And he was just wondering why he wasn't getting good results on that screen. And it's just because he wasn't using that on-hand radio button.
That's helpful too. I didn't know that was there. I always just, you know, go back to running the custom report and pulling it out. So that's super helpful.
Sure.
And maybe at the same time, a reminder of people, that little caret in the top middle too, where you can expand your filter options. Yeah, where you can just filter in here too, and don't have to, you know, necessarily run a separate report. So once again, there's these features that are there. It's helpful just to you know, maybe see them in context a few times. But take that, if you're on this webinar or you're part of these webinars, hopefully you're becoming a champion in your dealership in Lightspeed. That's something that we look at with our dealers, is who's the champion that when they learn something new, they share it, right? And bring it out to the group. And you know, who's the Lightspeed wizard? Do you have that, you know, Lightspeed wizard, Lightspeed champion in your store that can help bring these to the group? So
absolutely. I went and had dinner with my old BMW 20 group last night. And, you know, one of the questions I was asked was, you know, who offers the best Lightspeed training? And I said, to me, and nothing against your team, Tierney, and your team, Tag, because both of you guys do really good on this. But to me, the best thing that I've ever found is take that guy in your store who is the Lightspeed champion and find one of your friends who operates a really good dealership and send him there for a couple of days just to see how other dealers utilize the system. And he'll come back with more ideas than you'd ever dream of.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. Absolutely. I'm going to throw one more thing out there. I promised I'd give a little more trivia. Probably lost a bunch of folks already, but I'm gonna offer this anyway. And I may have mentioned this to you, Mark, when we were at AIM Expo. I can't remember. I was telling Mr. Lucas, my wife and I were out walking the cats last night. And there was a storm coming in, and it was just kind of this perfect atmosphere. Now, by walking cats, I mean they were in a stroller that was fully enclosed, so they didn't run away. But my wife started asking me questions about Lightspeed, and I hadn't thought about this, at least I think, since AIM Expo, so it's been a little while. And the thing that came to mind was, where did the name Lightspeed come from? Do you remember me talking about that at all?
I think I was drinking by the time we got to that.
Well, I probably was too, but I'm gonna tell you what legend says anyway, and someone in the audience or someone at Lightspeed home office may correct me later, but this is my understanding. So back to Ernie Blodgett, who was whittling away on his computer in his basement in 1983, building the first iteration of what would then be Lightspeed. Ernie was also a heavy metal fan. And he was trying to think, what am I going to call this thing? And so he was going through some different names in his mind that were band names like Metallica and Megadeth and all these things. And the name Lightspeed came to mind because it sounded like a heavy metal band. He goes, "That's it. I'm going to call it Lightspeed because it sounds like heavy metal." So that's kind of the history of where the name came from. It doesn't have anything to do with, are we fast? Are we this? Are we that? No, we sound like a heavy metal band. So put that in your back pocket and save that for a night at the bar.
I'm running that one through ChatGPT. I'm not sure about that.
Someone may correct me, so let me know. That's the lore that I'm carrying around with me. So we'll see.
With that, I'll say that's bringing us to a good point to close. But appreciate everybody for joining us today. And again, you should be already registered for the next one automatically. But if you have questions related to that or how to get that, feel free to reach out to us. And we're excited to get this next one going for everybody.
Yeah, buying guide next month. We're going to nerd out. So it's going to be 75 minutes of super granular details on how the buying guide works. And I tend to find that I think there's probably only about 10% of dealers actually utilize the buying guide across the country, at least utilize it somewhat correctly. And it's a little bit painful to get it set up, but once you do, we've got at our dealership, we've got 9 brands under the roof, and I can run a full buying guide and audit everything in under 60 minutes on a Sunday. And we maintain a pretty solid fill rate. So once you get it dialed in, works well. So looking forward to that.
Perfect.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, look forward to seeing the Amigos later and everybody else on the call. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice haircut, Brian.
Hey, thank you. Take care, everybody.